Hello and welcome to this edition of News 18 presents YUVA Bharat in association with IIMUN. And this is on a weekend, ladies and gentlemen, when India is going to assert itself, define itself, and also set the tone for the road ahead geopolitically. Not just in terms of contribution to COVID. At a time, we have the United Kingdom paying truant, trying to use the COVID app as a reason to not allow Indians, and respect the Indian vaccination program. We also have the fight against COVID-19. We have the changing situation in Afghanistan. We have the dragon getting increasingly active with the revised timelines of not 2049 but 2035. We have the Australia, UK, US, or the AUKUS kind of a combined. We've got France not very happy with some of the developments. There is Russia, which is doing something. All of this. And at that time, we're going to talk about Quad, the combination of four nations that came together post-tsunami. And after that, it was all dormant for at least close to a decade. But then it started getting increasingly interesting, increasingly engaging. So let's try and take this forward. And with us right now is Dr. Roger Liu, who is somebody who's keeping a close watch on what's happening in this region. And he is also the associate professor with Flame University. Rishabh Shah, president of IIMN, is with us. And we have Harshit Chopra, Sanmi Pawar, and Shruti Bhatt. Harshit is a second year student in Jodhpur, Rajasthan. Sanmi is a grade 12 student from Mumbai in Maharashtra. Shruti Bhatt, BA International Studies, second year. And let's do one thing. Before we ask Dr. Roger Liu why the Quad, let me go straight across to Shruti and ask her to start this today. Tell me, Shruti, and what is it that you would like to ask Dr. Roger Liu?
I think primarily as a student of international studies, my question to Professor Roger Liu would be, as you mentioned earlier, 20 years down the lane, what does a Quad look like? How does it impact me as a student and me as a grown-up? How do we see the Quad playing a role in changing alliances, changing international priorities?
Okay, thank you very much, Shruti. I hope you can hear me well. It's very good to see you here, my old friend Anand, Rishabh, and all the young students here. Especially, I would like to, I love to interact with young students, the younger generation of India. Actually, you're facing a totally new situation. You see our country growing, and you see that India is playing more and more important role in the world arena. That's very important. And it's very important that we are going to have a new mindset to think about what's happening around us and how we see the world. So thank you for your question, Shruti. What is Quad, and how is Quad going to influence every one of us, the nationals in the different countries in this area, and especially we have a focus on India. Well, Quad actually can be traced back to 2004. During the time we had tsunami taking place in the Indian Ocean region. So right after that, the regional countries were thinking about setting up a rescue mechanism that enhance and improve the relationship and coordination between the regional countries, including India, the US, and they got Japan to join inside as well. So the Quad starts as a functional forum and coordination mechanism between different countries. But after a few years, some countries sees the rise of China, and they try to expand this into a more strategically related forum or mechanisms that bring different countries all together. And this idea actually came from the Prime Minister of Japan during the time, Shinzo Abe, in his first term. So he took this idea forward, and in one of the address that he made to the Japanese Diet, he mentioned the term, the confluence of the two seas. The Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean should join together. And the point of confluence will be what we call, now we use a coin term, the Indo-Pacific region, right? So in 2007, he brought this up forward, and he mentioned something called the democratic diamond. So it's like a diamond shape forum that link four countries, four democracies in this region: the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India during that time. Well, this was a great idea, but unfortunately in 2008, well, Quad 1.0 went dormant for a while. That's a major reason behind that is because the change of domestic politics among these countries, especially in Australia. Well, all the countries almost turned left. So, and during the time that China was rising, and China was appearing on the world stage as a peace-loving country during that time, right? That was the eve that they are going to host the Beijing Olympics. So during that time, the momentum was lost. So the Quad just died down for a while. And after 10 years, Donald Trump became the president of the United States, and the whole world sees a different China. So Quad got its momentum. The four of the countries just got together since 2017. They met again. The diplomats of the four countries met again on the sideline of APEC, and they got together, and we see that Quad is growing stronger and stronger for the past few years.
Very, very beautifully put there. Sandeep, your question. I've got tons of questions, but I can ask him on another platform. So you guys go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, sir, till date, India has always had a stance of non-alignment. Now, being a part of the Quad, will it not be conceived as an anti-China stance, which will, hamper India's foreign policies?
Sami, thank you very much. That's actually a key question. Like you have mentioned, well, during Cold War era, especially following Nehru's general idea, actually we start during in the first few in the early years of after independence, especially, we try to keep a good relationship with China. So we are the first Asian country who recognized China as the People's Republic, right? Right after the UK. Well, UK is the first country, and then we followed them. And then for the first few years, from 1950 to 1962, actually India and China work really close. Zhou Enlai, the Prime Minister of China, has visited India for 4 times. And he has exchanged several long letters with Nehru. And in these letters, we will see the very close comradeship, and people are chanting very high tunes like anti-colonialism. And the Bandung Conference in 1955, as you remember, and we come up with the Panchshil, the 5 principles of a peaceful coexistence altogether. And everything looks so rosy at that time, right? And that's during the time that Nehru launched the so-called non-aligned movement. We try not to be sided with each side of the Cold War to give us the maximum extent of freedom to make use of the relationship with them, right? Because if you just lean towards one side, actually you are bounded, right? If NAM or non-aligned movement, or there are several variation or names for this kind of strategy or tactics. If this applies mainly to weaker countries, for a rising power like India, when we are growing stronger and stronger, when we are accumulating, developing our military muscles, when we try to take more responsibilities in this region, are we going to keep this tactics or strategy and use it without changing it for the years to come? This is something that we have to think seriously.
Harshit, your question.
Thank you. Basically, sir, my question is, like, as China is about to dominate and still dominating few countries of Asia and of different continents, and India's trade relations have hampered, and India's relations have a bit hampered due to it, and with the emergence of Taliban, and so how can India relations can get better in trade and in different areas, and how the Indian exports and the trade can get better. And as you said that that countries even can't trust upon they all have trust issues and they all have alliances. So how so is the Quad group countries also have these trust issues in some of the countries, or the all of them has good alliances with each other? Cause before also China dominated, or China pressurized Australia, and Australia backed out before also from the Quad. So will that thing will happen again if anything is going to happen with the Quad, or if the Quad is going to take any action? So how the stance will go ahead, and how India can better its trade relations.
Dr.
All
Liu.
right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Harshit. This is you got a one question which has interlinked parts, right? And they are all linked with each other. Let me start to intersect that. First is the role that Quad will play when a smaller country like Australia has been pressed by China, right? So I think Quad is a good design because when you're reading the news, you will see some people decrying and saying that, well, Quad should have become an Asian version of NATO, or Quad should stress more on its military aspect to make it a real security alliance. But I have a different idea for that. I think the best quality that Quad has upon the first version of its design is that it's a loosely defined and combined framework. Because if a framework is loosely combined, actually it creates some space for everybody to reside in, right? Quad actually, well, in Quad, you will see that there are different relationships being built. US and Japan has long friendship and alliance in the East Asian region. And this has been lasting for 70 years. So this is the strongest bilateral relations that existing in this Quad, right? And this will not change in a short time because they're having a common rival, which is China in the East China region, or East China Sea region especially. The other one that you have mentioned is Australia. For the recent years, Australia has been under pressure from the Chinese because the Chinese actually are taking on Australia because that's the weakest link of all. Australia is a small country, although its land mass is about the size of India, but the total population is only 23 million, about the population of Taiwan, right? So the China, Beijing has been using pressures, either it's commercial pressures, trade pressures, political pressures, or diplomatic pressures to Australia. So Australia realized that only the US can protect it.
Yeah, it's a good design, but it's also a tightrope walk. You know, as far as maritime security, development, trade, you're looking at Quad as an option. On the other hand, territorial aggression and territorial aspects, and also again trade, you're looking at the Russians. But Russia today is not the Soviet Union of the past. It is still also trade-wise, economically dependent on the Chinese. They have had their own territorial disputes with the Chinese, but today China seems to also be buying out a lot of the debt of the Russians too. And that's also a challenge for Vladimir Putin and Russia, that they can't overtly assert themselves. But Rishabh, go ahead, please.
Hello, very interesting observation that you made, Aman. And firstly, Dr. Roger, thank you for being a part of this. But I must, I have a plethora of questions. We won't have time for all, but and there are many that I think that many things that you said that probably I disagree with. But just to principally touch upon a couple. One, you mentioned that there's going to be a multipolar world, and the fact that we have different areas of power centers. We have different power centers across the world. Now, people don't use the terminology the Second Cold War, but in the way that I look at the geopolitics of the world as of what stands today, either like you rightly said that you are pro a particular country, which is the United States of America, or the second is what China is doing with OBOR and even the old maritime Silk Route. I feel that India has missed a trick, and this is, of course, in my humble opinion, and I don't watch the organization, that we've been left out from the AUKUS, and we've also and Quad, like you said, is loosely held. So at the end of the day, India is missing out. Is India missing out on strengthening its own security? Because at the end of the day, we were overtly dependent on the United States when it came to Afghanistan. They suddenly pulled out, and now we are having to face all those repercussions. So the fact that Quad is a loosely held alliance, don't you think that that is detrimental to India's interests? And the fact that, with the exception that is made for Australia, with the IAEA and so on and so forth, at the end of the day, there is no definitive plan. And of course, we can always criticize history and say that NAM was good or not good, the non-aligned movement was good or not good. But in today's geopolitics, do you think India has a definitive plan when it comes to countering the Chinese dragon?
Well, does India have a plan? It has to go back to our strategic culture, our history of how we actually, produce or write or make our strategic plans. And there was a famous professor from the US saying that, well, actually India is, India lacks a strategic culture. So we are so proud of our Jugaad or ad hocism. And we are very flexible. We deal with what's happening, in the last minute. And, people are so proud of that. But when it comes to the making of strategy, I agree with you, Rishabh, that we will need to think further ahead sometimes. It will take some planning. But before we take some planning, we have to identify the situation, right? We have to make some predictions. We have to make some assumptions. We have to do some research regarding the rise of China and the change of the different power distributions in this area, right? So I think the first thing that we can do is we have to bring some change in the education, especially we should encourage more young people to think in a strategic way, right? To encourage them to participate in the making of national strategy or the thinking process about that. That's very important. And you said whether we have missed the opportunity that we got left out by the AUKUS, right? Well, I think self-reliance is very important. We have to know what we are doing. The Afghanistan case that you have mentioned, that we rely on the US so much so that we miss the opportunity. Well, I think there are some precursor when Donald Trump was in his office that we can sense that the US was going to withdraw. Well, if you remember, he had a conversation with Narendra Modi, and he asked about whether India can pledge to send more ground forces into Afghanistan. And well, our official response is that we've been engaging in Afghanistan for so long because we've been building libraries and schools in the country, right?
See, interestingly, you must understand, we never depended on the US. The simple point was India knew that you don't want to put boots on ground in Afghanistan. You put boots on ground, you're sucked in. America spent more than $2 trillion over the last 20 years, lost more than 5,000 soldiers. What did they get? They've not got anything. Okay, the Chinese were building their OBOR. They were upset that the Americans left because America was giving them security. They were building their infrastructure all the way because the Americans were busy patrolling and controlling the Taliban. The Chinese were upset because unka free ka watchman chala gaya. That's what happened. Try and understand this. This is how. And wherever America has gone, nations have been destroyed. They've not been built. Nation building is not their job. They do policing for their interests. So if India aligns with them permanently, it will come at a cost where we'll have to become dependent on them, a cost where we will not be able to stand up on our own. It's a hard call that we have to take. How do I stand up for Sri Lanka? How do I, as the big brother in this region, stand up for them? If I'm not self-sustained, if I'm not reliant, is there a long-term plan? When the Prime Minister says we are in our 75th year of independence, where do you want to be at 100 years? That's a 25-year plan. The first time you're seeing a roadmap, and when he says we need to be self-reliant, we need to be self-reliant so that we don't have to buy an S-400 missile system from Russia and face Katka problems with Americans who are upset And then to offset that, we have to buy Chinook helicopters and we have to buy drones and Predators from them so that the Americans are happy. On that note, we're going to wind up. We're over time. Thank you very much. Dr. Roger Liu, always a great pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much. Harshit, Sunny, Shruti, and Rishabh. Wonderful. Thank you so much.